My name is George. I'm 62 years old and I've spent the last 3 decades of my life in the same place. This house, this garage. The town too is unchanged as far as I can see. A few new stores popped up, and maybe the gas station has a fancier sign now, but the air still smells like it did when I was a kid. Damp, piney, and a little too still in the mornings. There's something calming about that stillness, something that reminds me of a simpler time. But I'm not here to wax nostalgic. I'm just telling you the truth of who I am. I never quite understood the rush to leave home. This place, with its creaky floors and the old swing set in the backyard, is mine. And I've always felt grounded here, even when the world outside moved faster than I cared for. I work in my garage. That's my sanctuary. It's a mess, oil stains on the floor, dusty shelves cluttered with old parts, stacks of tools piled like forgotten relics. Some people might call it junk, but to me, it's a treasure chest of potential. Every old engine, every bike frame, every rusty piece of metal holds the promise of something new, something I can bring back to life. That's what I've always done. When I was younger, I used to work in a real garage, one with a roof that didn't leak, alongside men who knew the true value of hard work. They taught me everything I knew about engines and machines, about fixing what was broken, about building from scratch. Over the years, I collected my own tools, the ones I trust. My pride and joy is a workbench my dad built for me when I was 16. It's worn down now, the wood cracked and split from years of use, but it's my anchor. It's where I've repaired my motorcycles, tuned the car engines that kept me going for years, and even built a custom bicycle for my son when he was younger. That's where I find my peace. Eric, my son, lives in the city now. It's been a while since he left. Almost 10 years, if I'm being honest. He got into some fancy university out there, then landed a job in SMM. That's social media marketing, if you can believe it. His world is one of screens, hashtags, and Instagram influencers. When he calls, it's always some new product he's working on or some social media trend he's trying to figure out. He's into all that modern stuff I don't get. He's told me more than once, "Dad, you're living in the past. You've got to change. Nobody does things this way anymore." And I just laugh. Maybe they've forgotten how it's done. But the truth is, I don't mind. What I do here in the garage with my hands and my tools is enough for me. I like the smell of grease, the hum of an engine, the sound of metal clanking against metal. I don't need to tweet about it or post it on some app. For me, it's about the work, the real work. Eric doesn't get it. To him, I'm a relic. "Dad, you can't just live in the past. No one cares about fixing engines anymore. You're not living, you're just existing." I never take offense to his words. I know he means well. It's just that he's always been a little too wrapped up in his world. The one that moves fast, the one that's constantly chasing the next big thing. Me? I don't need to chase anything. I've got my shop, my tools, and the satisfaction of a job well done. And that's enough for me. It was a Saturday when Eric came over that day. The last Saturday I expected anything to change. It was a normal visit, at least I thought it would be. The sun was just setting, casting a warm golden light across the garage, the kind that made everything feel more timeless. I was under the hood of an old 1987 Chevy truck I'd been fixing up for a guy down the street. The engine had been giving me trouble for a week now, but I was close to getting it right. The steady hum of my tools filled the air, as familiar as my own heartbeat. Eric came in, like he always did, tall, dressed in something stylish and well put together. His shoes were always too clean, too polished for someone who claims to be a busy professional. But he was here, and that's all that mattered. I figured he might want to talk about his latest project or grab a beer, but he was distracted. He pulled out his phone, as he often did, and began recording. "What are you doing?" I asked, wiping grease off my hands. "I just want to capture this," he said, smiling. The kind of smile you give when you know something is coming. Something I didn't expect. "Capture what?" I asked. "You, Dad. Working. It's kind of funny, don't you think?" He nodded toward the cluttered garage, the piles of spare parts, the workbench I'd been using for decades. I didn't know what he meant by funny. Maybe it was the way I was hunched over the engine, focused on the task in front of me, or the fact that the truck itself looked like it belonged in a junkyard. Maybe it was the oil stains all over my robe, the one that had started out white and now resembled a piece of old battered fabric. But whatever it was, I didn't think much of it. I just kept working. All right, Dad, just keep doing what you're doing, Eric said. This will be hilarious. At that point, I figured it was just another one of his silly things. He often recorded little moments like that, little snippets of our lives he found amusing for his online friends. The next day, I thought nothing more of it. Then one morning a week later, I woke up to a strange sensation. My phone buzzed next to the bed, an unusual occurrence for me. I didn't check it at first, not until the second buzz, followed by another. I rolled over, grabbed the phone, and noticed dozens of messages popping up from people I barely knew. Confused, I opened one. It was from a neighbor. "George, you're a star now. People are sharing your video all over the place." I stared at the screen, blinking. There was a video of me, my dirty robes, my weathered tools, hands covered in engine oil. I was bent over the truck, absorbed in my work, and the caption underneath read, "Retro Father." He really thinks this is life. I sat up in bed, my stomach dropping. The video had millions of views. My hands were trembling as I scrolled through the comments. Some were kind, but many were not. Why is he living like it's the 1980s? Look at this fossil, still working with tools from the Stone Age. Lamau, this is what we call extreme outdated. Dinosaur, Dad, is this the real way to live? Eric's face wasn't in the video, but his laughter rang through my mind as I read those comments. I could almost hear him chuckling, his voice full of that same casual amusement he always had. And I realized the whole thing was a joke at my expense, a way for him to make me look foolish, to show how out of touch I was with the world he lived in. My heart sank. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel humiliated. Not at first. I just felt confused. Was this how it had all become? A digital joke? I set the phone down, staring at it for a moment. I couldn't decide what to do. I wasn't the type to start yelling, to argue over a silly video. I just didn't understand why Eric would do this to me. Why he would reduce everything I had worked for, everything I'd lived for, to a joke. He called me that evening. "Dad, you've got to see it. This thing is going viral. I'm telling you, you're going to be a meme." I tried to keep my voice even. "I saw it, Eric. I saw it all." He laughed again. "Come on, lighten up. It's funny. This is what the internet wants, Dad. Everyone's loving it. You're going viral." I paused. There was nothing more to say. "I'm glad you're having fun, son," I replied. "I'll be here, working like a dinosaur." That was all. No anger, no shouting, just silence. And after that, I went back to work. The truck still needed fixing, and I had a job to finish. The days passed and the video lived on. My phone buzzed with notifications every day for a while, but I ignored most of them. There was no point in checking. Eric's video had made its rounds and the ridicule had been swift. People I didn't know began reaching out. I heard laughter behind me in the coffee shop, only to turn around and see someone's phone held up with the video playing. I felt their eyes on me, and I would quickly turn away. My pride didn't allow me to make a big deal out of it, but it hurt more than I let on. It wasn't like I didn't know how things were changing. Technology had taken over, sure, but for me there was something about working with my hands, something about taking apart an engine and putting it back together that kept me grounded. I was part of a world that was rapidly slipping away, and I'd always been okay with that. I didn't need to keep up with the times. I just needed to keep doing what I knew best. Still, the silence between Eric and me grew. He would call, but I wouldn't pick up. I wasn't angry, not really. I was just tired of feeling like a punchline. But there was no need to yell. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. A week went by, then two. I was in my garage one morning, elbows deep in grease, trying to fix a stubborn piece on the engine, when I heard a knock at the door. It was early, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on my robe and stepped outside. A young man stood there, probably in his early 20s. He was clean-cut, wearing a simple jacket and jeans. He smiled, but there was a slight hesitation in his expression, as though unsure whether to approach a stranger or not. "Are you George?" he asked, a little unsure. I nodded. "Yeah, that's me. What can I do for you?" "I saw you on the internet. he said, nervously scratching his head. The video, the one that's going around uh, the retro video, I raised an eyebrow, but I didn't say anything. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring it up, he quickly added, holding up his hands. It's just, well, I was hoping you could help me. Help you? I asked, confused. Yeah, I've got an old bike, a 1970s Triumph. I've been trying to get it fixed up for months, but the engine's giving me trouble. I saw your video, and well, I thought maybe you could take a look at it. I don't trust anyone with these kinds of bikes, but you seem like you know your stuff. It took me a moment to process what he was saying. This kid, who had no idea who I was, had come all the way to my garage because of a video that had been meant to mock me. And yet here he was, asking for my expertise. There was no laughter in his eyes, no derision, just sincerity. I stood there for a long while, just looking at him. The weight of the moment settled in, and I finally spoke. Well, you've come to the right place. Let's take a look at that bike of yours. As we walked to the back of my garage, he talked a little more about his bike, his job, and his life. He was a local kid, studying in the city, doing his best to get by. But it wasn't just his bike that brought him here. There was something else, something unspoken. Maybe it was respect. Maybe he saw something in me that others didn't. We spent the next few hours in silence working on the bike. It felt good. It felt like I was doing something that mattered. Later that day, another knock came at the door, and then another. Each time it was a different person, some older, some younger, who had seen the video and wanted help with something. Most of them were just curious about my work, wanting to see how I worked with my hands. Some even offered to pay for my time. I didn't ask for any of it. I wasn't in this for the money. But it was becoming clear what I did mattered in its own way. People respected the fact that I knew how to fix things, how to keep them running long after they were deemed useless by others. And it wasn't just my hands that were in demand. It was the kind of life I led. A life where things had to be done the old-fashioned way, where time was taken to care about the small details. A life where you didn't give up on something just because it was broken. I didn't know it yet, but things were starting to shift. A week later, another knock came. But this time it was different. This time it was a man wearing a suit, holding a notepad and looking far too serious for my taste. I'm from the local newspaper, he said, extending his hand. You're George, right? I'm here to interview you. The man in the suit from the local newspaper sat across from me in the garage, his pen poised over his notepad. I could tell he was trying to figure me out, trying to make sense of who I was, this man who had suddenly found himself at the center of attention. So, Mr. George, you've become quite well known lately, he said, his voice professional but with an underlying curiosity. I'm sure you've seen the video, your son's post. It's gone viral. You've been called the dinosaur of persistence. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I've seen it. Seems like a lot of people are laughing. Can't do much about that. He raised an eyebrow, flipping his notepad open. It's funny, isn't it? People laugh at things they don't understand. But from what I've heard, it's your determination that's catching people's attention. Your refusal to change. You're being seen as an example of what real work looks like, what it means to stick to something, no matter how the world moves on around you. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't about recognition for me. I didn't do this for the praise. But as I sat there listening to the man talk, something clicked. This wasn't just about some viral video. This wasn't about being mocked or laughed at. This was about something deeper, a principle, maybe even a philosophy. People weren't just amused by me. They were admiring something they hadn't seen in a long time: persistence, patience, and a commitment to doing things the right way. The journalist asked a few more questions, probing about my life, my background, and why I continued to fix things in a world where technology had made everything faster and easier. I answered the best I could, not with grand ideals or speeches, but simply telling him that this was who I was. That's all. No more, no less. After the interview, the man thanked me and promised that the article would be out soon. As he left, I went back to the workbench, lost in thought. The noise of the world outside seemed so distant in my garage. It was like stepping into a time capsule, a place where everything slowed down. The next morning, the article came out. I wasn't expecting much, just a small mention maybe, but when I saw the headline, "The Dinosaur of Persistence, George's Unlikely Rise to Fame," I couldn't help but laugh. The article painted me in a way I hadn't anticipated. It didn't mock me. It didn't poke fun. Instead, it spoke about me with respect, highlighting my dedication to the craft and how, in a world driven by technology and convenience, there was something to be said about someone who kept doing things the old-fashioned way. The article went viral too. I never asked for any of this, but here it was, all the same. People started calling me an inspiration, a symbol of perseverance. They shared the article, commented on it, and for once, the comments weren't cruel or mocking. Instead, I read words of admiration, even awe. I was the kind of man they admired, the kind who didn't bow down to the rush of progress, but instead stayed true to what he knew. And then it happened. A week after the interview, I got another call. This time, it was from the producers of a local television show. They wanted me to appear as part of their Man of the Year segment. They told me it was for my perseverance and commitment to my work. They wanted to recognize me for sticking to my craft despite the ridicule. I couldn't believe it. Man of the Year? It sounded like something out of a dream. I accepted the invitation, of course. What else was there to do? But I had a feeling this would be the moment that would change everything. I spent the next few days preparing for the show. Not preparing in the usual way, though. I didn't buy any new clothes, and I didn't try to dress up for the occasion. I just threw on the same jacket I wore in the video, the one with the grease stains on the sleeves, the worn patches from years of use. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I just didn't care about fitting in. If they were going to put me on TV, they were going to get me as I was. That's all. The day of the show arrived, and I stepped onto the stage to a round of applause. I was a little nervous. Hell, who wouldn't be? But I didn't let it show. I sat down in front of the camera, the lights shining bright above me, and I waited for the questions to begin. The host, a middle-aged man with a warm smile, looked at me curiously. "So, George, you've become somewhat of a local hero thanks to your son's viral video. How does it feel to go from being ridiculed to being recognized for your hard work?" I didn't hesitate. It's strange. I never asked for this kind of attention, but I'm not here for the spotlight. I'm here because I've always believed that work speaks for itself. If you do something with your hands, something that matters, people will notice. It's just that it might take time. I guess I got a little lucky. The host laughed. "Well, I'm sure you've heard all the jokes by now. The retro father jokes, the dinosaur jokes. What do you say to that?" I smiled and leaned forward a little. "Yeah, I've heard them. And you know what? I'll own it. I am a dinosaur. But dinosaurs have something that most people don't. A strong backbone. And that's what's kept me going all these years." The audience applauded, and for the first time I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Respect. 2 weeks after my appearance on the local TV show, I found myself standing in front of a room full of people, all looking at me as if I had somehow transformed into someone else. The Man of the Year awards ceremony was a bigger deal than I expected, and for the first time in my life, I felt out of place. Not because I didn't belong there, but because I had never seen myself as the type of person who would ever be recognized like this. I still wore the same jacket, the one I had worn in that viral video, the one that everyone had laughed at. I didn't see any reason to change it. It felt like the right thing to do. This was who I was, and if they wanted to give me an award for it, they were going to get the real George. The ceremony was held at the community center, a small building where town hall meetings and the occasional fundraiser took place. The stage was simple, but it was lit up with bright lights that made me feel like I was standing in the center of the world. As I walked up to the podium to receive my award, I could feel the eyes on me. Some curious, some in awe, some in disbelief. But none of them mocked me. They weren't laughing anymore. The host, a young woman in a sharp suit, stepped forward and handed me the trophy. "George, you've been recognized for your perseverance, your commitment to your craft, and your unwavering dedication to doing things the right way, no matter what the world tells you. For these reasons, we're proud to present you with this award. Man of the Year." The applause that followed was thunderous. It took me a moment to realize that they were clapping for me. They weren't just clapping because I was there, or because I had become some kind of joke-turned-hero. They were clapping because they respected me. I took the microphone, not really knowing what I was supposed to say. I wasn't much for speeches, and I wasn't about to start making one now. Well, I wasn't expecting this, I began, my voice steady despite the weight of the moment. But I guess that's kind of been the story of my life. I wasn't expecting much of anything, and I just kept doing what I knew how to do. And here we are. A few chuckles came from the audience, but it wasn't the same kind of laughter as before. It wasn't mocking. It was real, warm laughter, the kind that comes from people who see someone as just genuine. I want to thank everyone for this honor, I continued, looking out at the faces in the crowd. But I think if there's any real recognition to be given, it's not to me. It's to the people who still believe in doing things by hand, the people who still see value in hard work, even when it's not the easiest way. You don't have to follow the trends or the crowd. You just have to stick with what you know is right. The applause came again, this time louder, and I stood there, feeling a warmth spread through me that I hadn't known I needed. Then as I stepped away from the podium, something strange happened. A familiar voice called out from the back of the room. "Dad?" I turned to see my son, Jake, standing there in the back. He was wearing a suit, something he hardly ever wore. His expression unreadable. His face had a mix of embarrassment and something else that I couldn't quite place. I nodded to him, signaling for him to come up. He hesitated for a moment, then walked slowly to the stage. The room fell quiet, and I could hear the shuffle of shoes on the floor as people watched him approach. When he reached me, I didn't say anything. I just waited. There was no need for words. He looked at me for a long time, and then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. It was a small, almost hesitant smile, but it was genuine. "You did it, Dad," he said, his voice soft. "You really did it." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Yeah, I did. But it's not just me, Jake. It's all of us who keep pushing forward. It's not about the awards, it's about doing the right thing." Jake nodded slowly, still unsure of what to say. He turned to the audience, looking awkward for a moment before speaking up again. I, I just want to say sorry, Dad. I didn't get it before. I thought you were just stuck in the past, and I was wrong. What you're doing is important. You've always been important, even if I didn't see it." And then, in front of everyone, he did something that surprised me even more. He pulled out his phone and started recording. "I'm sorry, Dad," he repeated, looking at the camera. "I guess I had to see it for myself. This is my father. He's not just a dinosaur. He's a legend. And I'm proud to be his son." The room went silent for a moment, and then the applause started again. This time, it wasn't just for me. It was for Jake, too, for the recognition he was giving me and for the respect he was finally showing. I didn't need any more words after that. It was clear that things had changed. The ridicule, the jokes, they were in the past now. The world had seen me for who I truly was, and I had earned something far more valuable than any award: respect. The award ceremony was over, and as the applause still echoed in my mind, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I had done what I always did, kept working, kept pushing through no matter what. But now the world had given me something I hadn't expected: recognition. As I stood backstage feeling the weight of the moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from Jake. "Dad, you've become a star. I'm sorry." The words were simple, but they hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know exactly what to feel. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to respond with some kind of sharp remark, something to let him know that I had been right all along. But the other part of me, the one that had spent so many years just quietly working, knew that this moment wasn't about me being right. It was about something deeper. It was about the respect that had been earned, not demanded. I stared at the message for a long time before I typed my reply. "You wanted a hype. I got a lesson." It was a simple line, but it felt true. Jake had wanted something flashy, something viral, something that would make him stand out. But what he hadn't expected was that it would be me, his prehistoric father, who would steal the show. Not long after I sent the message, I heard footsteps approaching. It was Jake, standing there in a suit, looking a little out of place. He hesitated, unsure whether to approach or just disappear into the crowd. But then he looked at me, and I could see something in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't have to. I just nodded toward the empty chair next to me, silently inviting him to sit. He did slowly, and for a few moments neither of us spoke. There were no cameras, no reporters hovering around, no one else to see us. It was just the two of us in that quiet corner of the room, the same way it had been for all those years in my garage. Just him and me, in our own little world. Finally, he spoke. "Dad, I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't think people would actually take you seriously." His voice was quiet, almost embarrassed. I looked at him, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "You thought I was a joke?" He nodded. "Yeah, I mean, at first. I just thought you were stuck in the past. You know, the whole dad fixing old engines thing. It felt outdated." I chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "I don't think you're wrong about that, Jake. I guess I just don't care about what's trendy. I never have." He paused, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. "I was wrong," he said softly. "I see it now. I see how important it is. What you do, what you've always done, it matters. People are finally starting to realize that." I didn't reply right away. Part of me wanted to hear more, wanted to hear him say how much he respected me. But another part of me knew that words weren't enough. The change I needed was deeper than that. It had to come from action. I leaned back in my chair and gave him a long look. "It's not about what people think, son. It never has been. It's about what you leave behind, what you teach people with your actions." Jake nodded, looking down at the floor, as though the weight of my words was sinking in. After a few more moments of silence, Jake pulled out his phone again. He started to type, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. I didn't ask what he was doing. I just waited. Finally, he turned the phone toward me. It was a post, a picture of me in my garage covered in oil, surrounded by tools. The caption read, "This is my dad, the real man of the year. Legend. Respect." He handed me the phone, and I stared at it for a moment, unsure of how to react. "You really mean that?" Jake nodded. "I do. I know I didn't get it before, but now I see it. I see what you've been doing all these years, and I'm proud of you, Dad." For a moment, I didn't know what to say, but then I smiled, a rare and genuine smile, and clapped him on the shoulder. "Thanks, son," I said, my voice softer than it had ever been before. "It's not easy to admit you were wrong, but I guess we all learned something in the end." We sat there for a few minutes longer, just the two of us. There were no more apologies, no more awkward silences, just a quiet understanding between us. Before he left, he stood up and looked at me one last time. "You know," he said, "I think I might stick around for a while. Maybe we could fix up that old bike of yours. I could use a little old-school learning." I raised an eyebrow, but then I smiled. "You want to work on bikes with me? I thought you had better things to do." He shrugged, a small grin creeping onto his face. "Maybe the Dinosaur can teach me a thing or two." I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my tools, stood up, and walked toward the workbench. It was clear now. My son was no longer embarrassed by me. He wasn't just accepting me for who I was. He was starting to respect it. It had been a few months since that day, since Jake and I sat together in that quiet corner of the awards ceremony, sharing a moment of unspoken understanding. Things had changed since then, and not just between us. The garage felt different now. It still smelled of old oil and rusted metal, the same as it always had. The hum of the workbench, the rhythm of the tools, the soft creak of the old chair I always sat in, they all remained the same. But there was something else, something that wasn't there before. A sense of purpose, of connection that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Jake had started coming around more often. At first, it was just an occasional visit, a few hours spent together working on a bike or tinkering with an engine. But as the weeks passed, he seemed to find more excuses to stay. He'd bring his laptop to work on some freelance projects, and I'd work on my machines. And sometimes we wouldn't say much at all, just letting the rhythm of our work fill the silence. But sometimes Jake would put his laptop down, grab a wrench, and join me at the workbench. We'd work side by side, not needing to speak, just lost in the task at hand. And when we did talk, it was no longer about mocking me or me trying to explain myself to him. It was about sharing stories, swapping tips, and respecting each other's ways of doing things. One afternoon, as we were taking a break, Jake looked up at the faded sign that still hung above the garage door. It was an old wooden sign I'd made years ago when I first started working here. It was nothing special, just a piece of scrap wood with my name carved into it. Over time, the paint had chipped away and the wood had warped, but it still hung there stubbornly above the door. Jake looked at it for a long moment, then turned to me. "You know, Dad," he said, "maybe it's time to update that sign." I raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. He smiled. "It's time to make it official, something that says who you are, what you stand for." I stared at him for a moment, and then I understood. He was offering me the respect I'd always wanted, not through words alone, but through his actions. The next weekend, we went down to the hardware store together. We picked up some new materials, and I watched as Jake carefully helped me craft a new sign. This one was bigger, sturdier. It was simple, but it was ours. The words painted in bold letters read, "The last dinosaur works here, and it's not extinct." It felt like the perfect tribute to what we'd both learned. A reminder that, while things might change and evolve, some things like persistence, hard work, and integrity were timeless. After we hung the sign above the garage, we stepped back and looked at it together. "I think this one's a keeper," Jake said, giving me a nod of approval. I chuckled. "I never thought I'd see the day when you'd be proud of a dinosaur." He grinned. "It's not about the age, Dad. It's about what you've built, what you've kept alive, and I'm proud to be part of it now." And for the first time in years, I felt a deep sense of peace settle in my chest. Not because the world had changed, or because I'd suddenly become famous, but because, for once, my son and I were finally on the same page. He understood me now, not just as his father, but as someone worthy of respect. And I respected him too, his hustle, his ambitions, and the way he had grown over the past months. As the days went by, we continued to work together, each of us bringing something different to the table. Sometimes Jake would get the old motorcycle running smoothly again with his technical know-how. Other times I'd show him the finer points of working with metal, teaching him things that couldn't be learned from a screen. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worthwhile. And when people would stop by the garage to ask for help with a bike, a car, or some other piece of machinery, Jake would stand proudly beside me, answering their questions with the same level of expertise I'd spent decades developing. No one laughed at me anymore. Instead, they respected me. They respected the work I did, and the man who had spent his life perfecting it. The best part, though, was the quiet moments we shared. The simple act of working side by side with my son, no longer a source of embarrassment for him, but something he was proud to be part of. In those moments, I realized that the real reward wasn't the viral video, or the award, or even the recognition I'd received from the world. It was that my son and I had found a new kind of respect for each other, one built on actions, not words. So, as I sat at my workbench that evening, my hands covered in oil and grease, I couldn't help but smile. Not because I had won, but because I had earned something far more meaningful. And I knew that for the first time in my life, I had become not just a father, but a man my son could look up to. Not because of who I had been, but because of who I had become. I wiped my hands on an old rag, looked over at Jake as he worked on a bike, and thought to myself, maybe I wasn't such a dinosaur after all.